This week on Health, babies born outside a mother's womb. Sounds like science fiction, but it's not.
It will be, certainly, within the next 100 years.
Artificial wombs are already a reality, not yet with humans, but with sharks.
We take the embryos from mum, we place them inside the artificial uterus.
Scientists are rewriting the rules of sex and reproduction. Example in Sweden with the world's first uterus transplant between a mother and daughter.
We think we know that we have a good chance of getting children.
These babies are all 2 days old, but they have another thing in common. They all arrived here via their mother's womb. Now, let's imagine that one day a baby could be born outside of a woman's body. It's a choice these children may have when they reach reproductive age. Fertility feats are nothing new, but today the options are expanding. We start this week's show with a look at the very real possibility that one day a child could be born after 9 months in an artificial womb.
Creating a baby in an artificial womb starts with classic IVF treatment, removing the eggs from a woman's ovaries and fertilizing them in a laboratory. An embryo is formed. Instead of implanting this embryo inside the body, it's transferred to a lab-generated replica womb. It contains all the important nutrients and chemicals needed for the fetus to grow. The baby's immersed in a supply of synthetic amniotic fluid controlled by an artificial placenta. It's linked to the womb by 2 catheters acting as an umbilical cord. One provides the baby with oxygen and nourishment, the other removes waste. Until now, the most advanced research with human embryos was conducted at Cornell University in 2002. Embryos survived in an artificial environment for 1 week before they had to be destroyed for legal reasons. Such research is ongoing, but with animal species far less controversial.
To see the world's first real-life example of offspring born using an artificial womb, we need to turn our attention to an animal that is biologically very different to humans. Certain shark species, however, have a reproductive system more like us than other fish.
We can imagine that this could be a first stone in what could be the development of a human artificial uterus. On an ethic point of view, would that be a good thing? I'm not so sure about that.
The world's first artificial uterus was essentially a mini aquarium, a little like this one here, but with specialised tanks and tubes. Researchers in Australia kept the shark embryos in there for up to 3 months before they were born in perfect health. Transplant correspondents with this next report.
This wobbegong shark may not look unusual, but it's the product of a world-first experiment. It was born from an artificial uterus.
The wobbegong shark is between 3 and 4 years of age and is completely like the sharks born in the natural way. He eats normally and has the same growth rate as the sharks that were born naturally.
Scientists designed the experiment in a bid to save the grey nurse shark, a threatened species. Their objective was to bypass the cannibalistic stage of gestation, in which grey nurse embryos eat each other inside the womb. Only 2 pups ever survive, making the population of the grey nurse difficult to maintain. Biologist Nick Otway designed this unusual contraption, an artificial uterus. He's brought 28 wobbegong sharks to life in 3 different experiments.
We take the embryos from mum, we place them inside the artificial uterus, and they're placed in this tube here along with the fluid, and then they are monitored, the dissolved oxygen, the pH, the temperatures, the fluid that's in there, it's filtered, continually oxygenated, and this is all monitored on computer.
The birth is as simple as opening the door of the contraption. It follows the later months of gestation, in which baby wobbegong sharks are left to develop in uterine fluid similar to seawater. Nick Otway now wants to try placing younger embryos in the artificial uterus, but they'll need specific conditions, including a different type of fluid, to survive.
The actual chemistry of the fluid is likely to be simple, but whether or not we can maintain the fluid in its pristine state that would be the biggest challenge. We'd have to go to these sort of steps to actually be able to start doing the work with grey nose sharks.
While some scientists would like to test the artificial uterus with human embryos, it's a distant dream.
Of course, with humans, there's the placenta, and it's the exchange of nutrients across the placenta. You'd have to replicate that, and at this stage, we're not even going anywhere near that.
Ethicists are concerned about the risks of such a venture.
Well, we do know that an unborn child in the womb responds, for example, to its mother's voice and its mother's emotions. What we don't know is what the absence of that human contact will mean for the fetal development.
For the grey nurse shark, the battle to survive comes at a price. Scientists say the next phase of the experiment will cost several million euros.
Artificial wombs, labelless births, reproduction without sex. To discuss some of these ideas, I'm joined by Arati Prasad, author of a new book called Like a Virgin, How Science is Redesigning the Rules of Sex. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
First up, an artificial uterus. Is it something that we will see in our lifetime?
It very well could be. Some scientists say that with the knowledge and technology that we have at the moment, if we threw all of it at it, we could keep a baby alive, a fetus alive in a womb between 14 weeks of gestation and 22 weeks. Now, the youngest baby that's been kept alive when it's been born prematurely was 22 weeks old. If you're looking at keeping a baby fetus in a womb for the entire gestation of 40 weeks, then scientists say, well, within 100 years, we will see that happen.
Within 100 years. But isn't it better for a baby to be born in its mother's womb? Are there advantages with that?
There are certainly disadvantages to that. There may be advantages to that, but a lot of the influence that a mother has on a child, it may be good, it may be bad, or it may be completely neutral. Negative influences are things like drug abuse, drinking alcohol, and stress as well. Stress is something that scientists now understand can be inherited when a mother experiences in the later stages of pregnancy through a hormone called cortisol. So it's a very physical thing. So artificial womb counterintuitively could be a healthier place for a baby to be.
Would it change our conception of what we now perceive to be the role of a mother or a father?
I think in the long term it probably won't, and I say that because a lot of the opposition there is to the idea of growing a baby outside of a womb is the bonding element, because it challenges something very intimate and human about the bond between mother and child. But at the moment you have adoptive parents who bond with their children, you have grandparents and uncles and aunts who bond with a child even though they haven't carried the child in their own womb. And also, you know, if you're able to watch a fetus growing, it's really a magical thing. When you see that child growing inside of you, because you can visualize it, that may add to the bonding, not detract from it.
And just very quickly, a last question. Sex for reproduction, is that something that's going to become redundant?
I don't think so. I mean, IVF is kind of reproduction without sex, and that's been going since 1978, and people are still having sex. And I think there are people who are infertile and who will really want to use this technology. There are millions of women who are born either without wombs or who have had cancer treatments and have had to have their wombs removed at a very young age. And so these are technologies that there will be people who want to use them. For the rest of us, we'll probably carry on having sex just as normal. It's not a threat to that.
Thank you very much for being with us, Arati Prasad, and we look forward to hearing more of your work in the future.
Thank you.
It's more than 30 years ago now since the world welcomed the first baby born through in vitro fertilisation. Nowadays, IVF is a routine procedure, repeated at this clinic dozens of times each week. Today, embryos are 6 days old when implanted, marking a significant jump from the past.
We have a better chance of pregnancy than we did when the embryo was only 2 or 3 days old, because it's larger and it's almost ready to hatch and to attach to a woman's uterus. So if we're lucky enough to seize this moment, we have a higher chance of pregnancy.
Thanks to IVF, around 350,000 babies are conceived in laboratories a little like this one each year. But it doesn't stop there. Today, researchers are giving fresh hope to women who can't have a child, even those without a womb. This next report from Sweden, where doctors are celebrating the world's first successful uterus transplant. Today's operation was more than 10 years in the making. Leading the team, Professor Mats Brännström in what is the world's first uterus transplant between two mothers and their daughters. One recipient was born without a uterus. The other lost hers to cervical cancer. Both were in their 30s and desperate to carry a child in their womb.
Before surgery, we have done in vitro fertilization, so we have embryos stored, so we know there is a fertility in the couple. And after surgery, the woman is on immunosuppression, and we also will check that we will not get a rejection.
Reaching the uterus isn't easy. Its location in the pelvis is like working through a funnel. To begin, the team removes the organ, careful to preserve the blood vessels which are needed for the transplant. In the meantime, the uterus is kept on a bed of ice while the vessels are flushed with a preservation solution. It's then inserted into the recipient, taking up to 40 minutes for the blood circulation to begin. An operation like this has already produced offspring in rodents and other large animals.
We have not produced children or infants in non-human primates, but we consider it's going to be easier in humans. So we think we know that we have a good chance of getting children.
Certain medical professionals have questioned whether transplants for non-essential organs are necessary or even safe. Yet the doctors here in Sweden say transplants can and should be life-enhancing.
Transplant surgery's moved on from only transplanting vital organs to also organs that increase the quality of life. That's the reason behind a face transplant, and it's the same with the uterus too.
Uterine transplants have, however, one unique feature. They're temporary. Doctors recommend the organ be removed after a maximum of 2 successful pregnancies. Reproductive science often raises as many questions as it does answers, medical, social, ethical. But as long as scientists continue to conceive the inconceivable, society will be forced to consider the role man's manipulation of nature can or should play in our lives. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.